Good evening again. I'm excited again about another episode of the Conversation 98, and I thank you guys so much for rocking with your boy. And I'm excited again for another week, another topic, another time to just sit down and have a good old conversation. So I just want to thank you guys so much again for the continued support, and it means a lot. And I'm very appreciative of just the opportunity of just coming back on and talking with you all shortly on tonight. Um, but hopefully, I'm hoping that everybody is having a great day. Things are going well with you, um, like it is with me. And make sure you share this. Let me know where you're tuning in from, um, so we can go ahead on and get this thing going. But again, excited for another week, another opportunity as we talk about this topic tonight. And I think this topic is a relevant topic and a topic that I think we all can kind of relate to and speak on. So again, we're going to get started sharing this with a few people, but let me know where you're tuning in from. And feel free to interact because this is a interactive conversation. So looking forward to the dialogue tonight. But again, man, we're episode 116. We're up to episode 116, 116th episode, and I'm truly excited and about continuing this the conversation. That's what it is. So again, so tonight we're gonna get right into it and get right into this conversation because I was pondering and thinking about it and was thinking about, hey man, what would I talk about this week? And I was having a conversation with my mom, and and I began to reflecting back over my life, and I thought about you know this topic and the topic for tonight about what would be good about having this discussion. I think this discussion is good, so we're gonna go ahead on and get started. And discussion tonight we're talking about is learn to find and enjoy the freedom within structure and accountability. And and when we think about that, sometimes that can seem when I look back over my life and I examine my life and the things that I've experienced, my life experiences, uh, structure and accountability don't always seem to be something that you can enjoy. Don't always seem to be something that you can appreciate in that moment because sometimes, most of the time, accountability, structure, and accountability felt like it was restrictive. It felt like that it was almost like punishment um, until I was able to gain an understanding of what it was doing. Within that structure, within that protection, right, within that accountability, it was building a platform for that I can live on. It was building a platform that I could catapult from and be and have a good foundation. And that's the thing. It was building a platform for a good foundation, and I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. Why am I grateful for that? Because the structure and the accountability that I grew up and I was blessed to grow up in at the moment wasn't fun, but it built that platform, or it built the foundation so that I could start to build my life on. And what I mean by that, when you growing up and you want just the freedom, and freedom, what I mean by freedom, how can you enjoy the freedom, learn to enjoy, find and enjoy the freedom within structure and accountability? How what you mean by is freedom, instruction, accountability when everything seems to be where you restrict it, and you feel to be confined, and you feel not to be, you want to be free. You just want to be able to do whatever you want to do. But what I found was there was some freedom that was within that structure and that accountability, because within that structure, it was providing protection. It was providing a foundation that I could live the rest of my life on. It was providing a foundation of sanity. It was providing it was eliminating a lot of chaos. It was preventing a lot of things that I personally myself didn't have insight on, but it was preventing those things, or putting me in a position so that I can mitigate a lot of future hardships in my life, based off of the structure and the accountability that I grew up under. And I know it can seem that way. And one of the reasons why I know it can seem that way is because, you know, many times when we grow up, and I can remember, I wouldn't say that I grew up in a very strict home, but I grew up in a structured home where we had rules, we had things that we had to abide by, right? That was structured. It was understood structure. And I couldn't do things. I wasn't allowed to do certain things that some of my friends or some of the people that I knew that grew up in a community that I grew up in was allowed to do. You know, I had certain things that I had to abide by. And at first, I was very frustrated at times because I felt like that I was being controlled, that I was being restricted, and I didn't have the freedom that I thought that I deserved, right? But as I look back on it, it was definitely, I'm very appreciative of that, because most of those people who had, quote unquote, those freedoms did not have the boundaries in which that they could pull themselves back, and they found themselves in situations, unfavorable situations later on, that I did not have to go through. And the reasons why I'm very appreciative of that is because I began to realize that in that structure and in that place of accountability, I learned to really enjoy those freedoms. And it's some freedoms in that. Why? Because this is good, right? Because when we looking at structure and accountability, most of the time we look at it from a space of temporary, right? We look at it from a space of where it's temporary. We're only looking at it for the right now. We're not thinking a long term. We're thinking we have a short-term focus. So in the short-term focus, when you're dealing with structure and accountability, man, we don't like that. It don't feel good. It is not exciting. And I would tell you, it's not fun. Why is it not fun? Because you be in control. I can't do nothing. My parents ain't letting me do nothing. I can't do this. I can't do that. But what we're not looking at is what you can't do right now. Is it enabling you to do what you want to do, or more of what you want to do in the future? So that structure and that accountability is building that foundation so that you can have something in the long term. So if you stay short-term focused, you're going to be frustrated. You got to switch to long-term focus. Hey, Priscilla, how you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you. Thanks for tuning in. But I can go back. I mean, think about it. And if we all be honest, right? You can, a lot of the people, right? And I look at the structure and the accountability, right? A lot of times it is not very well received, right? Structure and accountability is not very well received when we are not allowed to do the things that we want to do in that moment. It's not received. It's not received when you got that parent that's telling you no when you want to go do something that you want to do. It's not received when you are being held accountable, or you being in a structured environment and people are holding you accountable and they're pulling out the potential that you have in you, but you don't see it, or you don't want to do the work to bring it out of you. And I would tell you there's some freedoms that you have to find and enjoy that. And a lot of that comes from you starting to look and hold yourself accountable yourself and getting mature into a space to where, you know what, I got to start dealing with the reality of me and be honest about yourself, because guess what? Most of the time our frustrations are misappropriated. We push it on other people because we don't want to do the work to change what we know we need to change already. And the reason why we get upset with that is because, right, it's just a natural thing. And that's dealing with us, right? And there is freedom. You can, like I said, learn. You have to learn to find and enjoy the freedom within structure and accountability. My mama said boundaries are set for protection, not denial. That is true. And Priscilla said absolutely. But Mom, I'm gonna go back to what you said and reiterate what you said, because that's a good point, right? Because you said boundaries are not set by protections. Boundaries are set for protections and not denial, right? But it doesn't feel that way when we have to, when we're being told no, when we are faced with those boundaries, right? Because it doesn't feel like protection, it feels like restriction, right? And that's something that, and if we continue to keep our mindset and focus on that, right? That's why it's hard for us to kind of see the other side, right? And I will be honest with you, most of the time, right, when you stuck in the short term or the right now, and you are faced with those structure, or you're faced in a structured or accountability, right? And like somebody said before, accountability feels like an attack when you're not ready to deal with the reality of you, right? And that's why it feels like a attack, because it feels restricted. But it's not a denial. It's for your own good. It's for your own protection. That's what it's there for. And just with everything, when you can look at it from from any relationship, any dynamic, or any relationship, right? And I'm talking about all of the ships, right? Professional relationship on your job, your intimate relationship with your significant other, your spouse, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with you, even with you as a teacher, you as a coach, with those, your mentor, your mentees. You can have all of these relationships, right? Comes from structure. There's going to be some feeling of restriction that comes with accountability. It is. Priscilla said, my son just said to me a few minutes ago that I stayed on him as he was growing up. He didn't and still don't like it as accountability, right? Yeah. But at the end of the day, right? And I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, because this is a good point. This is a real good point to make. And I personally did not like a lot of the things that my father was doing with me. And I felt that growing up in a home with two sisters, right? And I felt that my dad was not being fair with me, comparably speaking to my sisters. I felt that he made me do things that I felt just wasn't fair at the time. And I couldn't understand it at the moment. And I was frustrated. I thought my dad was not a very, I respected him, but I didn't think that he was a very intelligent man in a lot of ways, because I thought I knew better, even though I was young and dumb and stupid. But I had the assumption that I knew better. But it wasn't until I got a family of my own where the light bulb went off and I had an epiphany that everything that my dad was doing was preparing me and for that. So that restriction, of what I thought was restriction, right, wasn't restriction. It was preparation, right? That accountability wasn't a restriction. That accountability was preparation. I want people to really think about that, right? Because when you look at it, it's like, man, can I get a break? Like, honestly, can I get a break? Like, if we and I would use this for an example, right? I would use this for an example. Think about this, right? Think about many of us. Think about the teachers. There have been some teachers that we can think about that we just did not like at the moment, right? And I can remember my 6th grade teacher, Miss Rains, and shout out to Miss Rains. Miss Rains worked us like we thought that we was just in a concentration camp. We had homework every night. We always had some work to do. When we was getting ready to go out for PE, right, we had to finish our assignments, and she made us do a lot of work, right? And at the time, we were like, man, we always got something to do, and we was complaining, right? And this was for 6th grade, in 6th grade. But I can recall when I got to 9th grade and we got to 10th grade and we was doing those advanced level maths, man, that thing was easy. I'm talking about easy, like boom, easy. And I saw other people who didn't have what we had, they were struggling. So it made me appreciate that foundation that she pushed us to accomplish. But when it started, I ain't like it. No, I ain't like it. At the time, that did not feel like preparation. It felt like punishment. And man, that's good. Because when we have to look at accountability, right? When we look at accountability, it doesn't feel like preparation. Accountability initially, and a lot of things, structure and accountability can feel like punishment. It can definitely feel like punishment. It can definitely feel like punishment when you're being pushed out of a comfort zone. It can definitely feel like punishment when you are being challenged in areas that you have always just been able to get over. It can feel that way, right? It can be very extremely frustrating. It can be, right? But it can also be when you look at it, right? And that's why I'm talking about learning to find enjoy and find freedom, right? In a structure and accountability, right? That comes when you can shift your mindset to understand that it is not punishment, it's preparing me for something that I don't even know that I need to be prepared for. And you have to switch. Once you switch that mindset, you'll understand that it's there, right? And I would tell you this, right? It is better to be prepared for something that you don't know that you need to be prepared for than to have to react to something that you wasn't prepared for. And the reason why I bring that up is one thing that we don't see and that I couldn't understand as a younger person was foresight. I couldn't understand foresight. I couldn't understand it for the reason or I couldn't understand it because I was so caught up in the right now. I was just so caught up in right now what I was doing. But I couldn't see and couldn't think 5, 10, 20 years from now. And I'm appreciative of people like my grandfathers, both of them. I'm appreciative of my dad and the people that prepared me, my uncles and all of those people that I was able to be around and observe that put me in positions and made me uncomfortable sometimes and held me accountable on some things to prepare me to walk into the position of fatherhood that they knew I was going into, the position of a leader and for within my home and my community that they was preparing me for. See, it felt like punishment when I couldn't do what I wanted to do. It felt like punishment. It felt like punishment when I couldn't stay out as late as I wanted to stay out with my mom. It felt like punishment when I had to call and let them know where I was. And I used to get upset because I'm like, y'all know where I was either over my girlfriend's house or my granddad's house, but they still wanted me to call. And at the time, I was just thinking that they were just trying to impede on what I wanted to do. But what I didn't understand was I didn't have the perspective of a parent that they had. So now as a parent, I fully understand why they wanted me to call them and just let them know where I was. Because now, guess what? I understand why parents stay up late and wondering about their kids and just the safety of their kids. Not so much that I don't trust them. It was, I just want to make sure that they are good and they're safe. I can remember this one time that I missed curfew. And I went and I tried to get my sister Portia to open the door. I knocked on the window to try to get her to open the door. Portia was like, I ain't opening the door. So I went back to my parents' window and I knocked on the window. And I remember my dad, he looked up at me and laid back down and went to sleep. So in our house, we had a deadbolt lock from the inside. So somebody had to open the door from the inside. And that night I had to sleep in the car. Now we stayed in the country. I had to sleep in the car that night. And what I learned about that night was, and my dad, he didn't yell at me or nothing the next day, but I learned something valuable lessons in that. I learned that I had to be accountable. Like I couldn't get mad and I had to own up to what I wanted to do. But it still took me a long time to understand what he was doing. And I would tell you, my mom got on here perspective, right? The thing I want to say about perspective, I want us to really look at perspective, right? Your perspective will change based off of your experiences. And one thing that is hard to understand, it's hard to imagine, it's hard to wrap our mind around, especially when we're younger, is that we are looking at it from a limited point of view and limited experience. And it is not saying that you are not cognitive. It's not saying that you are less than. It's not saying that you don't have the ability to. No. But most of the time when we're looking at that, a lot of times, especially if I'm speaking from a caring perspective, a parent that is invested into your life and making things better, they want to prepare you to be in a better position than they were. So they don't want you to go and experience a lot of the same hardships. So that's why they put those structures and that accountability in place to prepare you for your future. But it's hard. It is hard to just really accept that at times. Why? Because at the time we don't want to listen. Not so much want to listen. Hey, I got to figure it out. I know I'm good. But no, I'm telling you, you can find enjoyment and freedom in that accountability. Why? My mom said, if you are capable of understanding life, it will change. It will, if not, you will not change. And that is true. And one thing I do want to say this, right? I want to say this from this perspective, right? Learning that freedom within the structure, right? And what I mean by freedom within the structure, I will use this analogy. There were, I have been deployed for 31 months of my life, 31 months. And with those deployments, we operated what we call forward operation bases, FOBs. And within those FOBs, they had perimeters, right? And within those perimeters, we usually have walls or gates or some type of mechanism, berms or anything. We used to have guard houses along to be manned so that we can make sure that people within were protected, and they were protected from outside threats. Now, within the FOB, you was on those spots and you went outside of those spots, conducted your missions, and came back in. A lot of people that were deployed, they stayed on those FOBs. They was on there for a year, 9 months to a year. They never left. They stayed on there. People could argue that, guess what? That was restrictive. They was on that isolated spot, the size of a community pretty much, and they couldn't go out, or they didn't go out, and they was restricted for that for months. Some people could argue that they were restricted. But me, I would argue that they were protected. Because even though they were limited to the space that they can go to, they was able to experience an increased sense of security being within those walls, and they could do things within those walls that they would not have been able to do outside of those walls. And I use that analogy because guess what? In structure and accountability, there's freedom within that. You have to look within. What is it being done for? What is it being done for? And understand, a lot of times, look at the purpose behind it. I would tell you, if many of us would look at it, we'll realize that a lot of the stuff that we frustrated with, or we haven't healed with, a lot of the wounds that we have from our past are really just rooted in us not being able to process the understanding of why people did certain things for us. Because we're looking at it from a restrictive standpoint instead of from them being protective. And yeah, we may not agree with the methodology. We may not agree with how they did things. That's not what I'm arguing. You may not agree with how your parents raised you or how they held you accountable. You might not agree with the method in which they did it, but understand, if you take some time to understand the purpose behind it and look at your life and how your life is beneficial of it right now, you can look at that and just say, you know what? I might not have done it that way. I'll do it a different way, but I can appreciate why they did what they did. And in a lot of that, we'll find healing if we did that, if we just processed that, if we looked at it from that perspective. So that's one way of just kind of looking at it, because you have to learn to find and enjoy freedom within that, because it's all about your mindset. It's all about your perspective. Because you can look at it from a restrictive one, or you can look at it from a preparation perspective or a protective one. And if you change that, that'll help you look at seeing how much freedom you have in it. Because most of the time, the temporary discomforts, man, that's good. Most of the times, the temporary discomforts of what you feel like being restricted in your in the structure and the situation of a structure and accountability, most of the times those things where you feel restricted you won't really understand or even see the benefits of until later, because it's preparing you for something that you can't see that you need to be prepared for right now. And like I said, as a father, it's certain things that I do with my son and my sons right now. It's certain conversations that I have. It's certain things that I talk to them about right now that is preparing them for fatherhood. And that can come within a short period of time, or they can become within years. But it's certain things that I'm preparing them for. I can shout out to my former battalion commander, Colonel retired Reed Hudges. He was exceptional at putting you in positions to prepare you for situations that you will face well after your time with him. And that he did certain things when I was a lieutenant, right, that prepared me. And he I like how he did it. The way that he did it, he was very good at it, where he would put you in a situation, right, and then put you in another situation within that for you to grow. And once he see that growth, he'll challenge you in another space, and he'll challenge you in another space, and he'll challenge you in another space. And at the time, I could how he was doing what he was doing. But as I continued to go on and I got promoted and went on up in the ranks, I took those lessons learned that he forced me to go into, and I was able to use that to help me the increased level of responsibility that I was going to have to take on. And I'm very appreciative of that. But at that moment, I couldn't understand why things was being done. But now I can look at that and I embrace structure. I embrace accountability, right? Because I realize that within that, there's freedom in that to do full reign within that structure. Because guess what? As people, we all need boundaries. We all need things that we all need boundaries. And that's even, we need boundaries to protect ourselves from ourselves. We need boundaries to limit access that the people have to us, because everybody is not in it for your best interest. And we need those things. And it is good to be able to embrace those things. Why? Because once we learn to embrace those boundaries, or the boundaries that we set for ourselves to protect ourselves, we eliminate or we mitigate a lot of potential hardships that we will have to face in our future. So that's all what I'm saying on this one. And I know I'm not before you long tonight, but that's the conversation that I wanted to have about this. And just look at it. Stop being upset, man. Stop being upset that you thinking that your mama or your dad had been too hard on you growing up and they stayed on you. Stop being so frustrated about it and stop looking at it from the perspective where you feel like that you was constrained, you was limited, or you was controlled, from the perspective of you were being prepared, you was being protected, right? You was being built up to be able to handle this 4-letter word called life that you're going to have to navigate through. So don't walk around and harbor unforgiveness and harbor a lot of other things because of what you felt that you may have been wrong. Look at it from the perspective of they were preparing you. And I can guarantee you, if you take inventory of your life and you look at it right now, a lot of those things you was upset about, you show benefit from it right now. You're benefiting from it. You're benefiting from being that structured environment. You benefited from that accountability. You're not having those mental breakdowns in the workplace because you never was held accountable growing up. You know how to navigate life, this 4-letter word called life. You are comfortable with being responsible for yourself. You have the ability to manage yourself, and you have the life skills to operate on your own. And not only operate on your own, right? You have the life skills to bring other people in, children, a spouse, and all this, and operate as a functional person and not a dysfunctional person. So that's why I said, man, do not be weary or be frustrated or harbor some things from how you feel like you was restricted. No, you was being protected. You was being protected. Because I'll tell you, a lot of things, people know things or prepare you for things that you may not know that you need to be prepared for. So again, man, thank you guys so much for rocking with your boy. You can go check me out on my other platforms, The Conversation 98 on YouTube, The Conversation 98 here on Facebook, also as well as The Conversation 98 on TikTok, and The Conversation _98 The Conversation _98 on TikTok, and The Conversation 98 on Instagram. So thank you guys so much. Very well appreciative. Looking forward to the conversation next week. You guys have a great and wonderful week. God bless.